Welcome to your next tape of the Joe Verde training program, How to Close More Sales. This program was designed by Joe to help you close more sales, overcome your customers' objections, stay off price on the lot, and hold gross. There is also homework and a quick quiz for you to fill out at the completion of each tape in this series. And now, let's begin. Here's Joe.
Well, what was your favorite close? Remember your homework? You're supposed to pick a couple favorite closes off that? If you're like most people in class, the assumptive close is by far the most preferred close, and again, it's the easiest one to remember, it's the easiest one to use, and it's the most effective. Not one of the most effective, it's the most effective. It's a real simple close to use. You just say something positive, you ask an either-or question. Bob, you're going to love your new car. Sounds like we found a perfect car. How do you want it registered, your name or her name? Or Bill, this pickup truck's going to handle all your business needs. You want to put the bumper on today or bring it back in on Thursday? It's a very easy close to use. Another favorite close seems to be the similar situation close. Did you like that one, where you tell a story? You probably use that a lot. That kind of puts people's mind at rest. They know somebody else just like them just made the same decision. The soul line close, a lot of people say, and that's a very effective, very easy one to use. You'll find out if they have an objection. So whichever you like, practice, drill, and rehearse those two. Next thing we've got to do, we've closed. We can assume we're going to get some objections. Whether we do or not, we need to figure out what to do when we do get an objection. You close with your assumptive close. Bob, sounds like found a perfect car. How do you want it registered? Your name or her name? And he's probably going to come up with one of three objections on page 67. Middle of the page, three common excuses they give you for not buying. Now, these aren't their real objections. These are the things that they say. A price question, I'll think it over and get back to you. I want to talk to somebody else. Now, our job is to find out what they mean when they say, I'll think it over and get back to you. Most of us spend most of our time trying to overcome the wrong objection because we don't understand how to find it. The techniques we're going to talk about are not really to close on the objection, they're merely to find it. Now, as we go through the workbook in this section, I'll probably throw a close in, but the goal here is to find the objection, and we'll talk about how to close on objections a little bit later. You'll also find that you use a lot of the same techniques in closing as you do in closing on objections. You're still closing, but you're closing on a specific objection. And we'll talk about those. One note at the bottom of the page on page 67, it says on any objection, make sure you're talking to the right person. You know, a lot of times we're trying to close the sale with the person who can't make the decision. You need to know who the decision maker is. So, and you'll find that out in your investigation. The more time you spend on the lot, the more these little problems come out and you figure out what everything is. The more time you spend on the lot, the more rapport you build, the better you investigate. You'll hear clues in the conversation about they're going to shop, or they tell you they're going to look at a Camaro as well as the Mustang. It's that when we go straight from the curb to the car that we miss all these. And you can plant seeds and handle most of them, just like in the fear of loss or the don't miss out clause. Page 68. One of the most important things you need to understand on objections or closing or anything else, it's the top of the page, number one. First, you should understand that what people say isn't necessarily what they mean. What they say isn't what they mean. And tell you a quick story. I was selling cars and I sold the first black tan leather turbo automatic Z that came into California. Had this guy down, he was a young professional, wanted the car, wanted to be the first on the block to have the car, knew he was going to have to pay for it, he could afford it. And we stayed in touch. When that first one came in, he came in, bought it. He paid $3,000 or $4,000 over sticker price. Happy with the car. His motive, his buying motives, his emotional reasons for buying the cars, he wanted to be the first one on the block with a pretty car. He wanted to show it off to all of his friends. He was telling me in our investigation, building rapport, how he's going to surprise his girlfriend with it, take her out to dinner and do all those things. So he really was an emotional buyer. He just wanted to be the first one on the block. We sold it to him, and $3,000 or $4,000 over sticker, and a few days later, a week later or so, he came back in the showroom. His body language was like this. He came back in, and I was standing in the showroom, leaning on a car. My manager was 10 feet away in the office. The door was open. We had the glass office. And he knew this customer. He knew we made a lot of money on him. Customer came in with his arms crossed, and he said, Joe, I'm having a problem with what I paid for this car. Now, I knew the customer. I knew that I could ask the right questions and pull this out of him. My manager misunderstood what he was saying. My manager jumped up and said, oh, hi, Mike. And he introduced himself, and he said, what's the matter? And Mike said, you know, I'm having a problem with what I paid for the car. And my manager didn't investigate, didn't know what his buying motives were, and he said, oh, and he's trying to recover. Didn't want any heat, didn't want to have to take any money off the price. He said, you know what, I had some things I was going to give you the other day next time I saw you, and he disappeared, went back to parts. And he came back with a bra, he came back with a car cover, he came back with the rear louvers, he came back with different floor mats or something. While he was gone, I said, Mike, when you say you're having a problem, I mean, you like the car, don't you? And I started using my isn't it, wouldn't it, couldn't it's, control questions, going back to build a value. He started out like this, and I said, Mike, you like the car, didn't you? I mean, it's not the car, is it? He said, no, I really like the car. I said, then you went out to dinner with it. When you got it, you told me you were going out and take your girlfriend out. Y'all went out, and he said, oh, yeah. And I said, well, how was that? And he said, oh, it was great. I said, she liked it too, didn't she? And he said, yeah. What was it like when the valet parked that? I bet you ate that up, didn't you? I bet the valet was impressed, wasn't he? And he said, oh, yeah. And we talked and talked, and I got the yeses and I got the emotions built up again. And he said, you know what? I really feel a lot better. He said, it really wasn't a price. I was just having second thoughts. And he said, thank you very much. About that time, my manager came around the corner, dropped off the bra, the car cover, the floor mats, and the thing on the back, and manager said, here, I want to give you these things, and Mike's smiling now, and manager thought he handled it with all the stuff. And he disappeared back in his office, went and got a cup of coffee or something. Mike now is happy, and he said, what do I do with all this stuff? I don't know. What do I do with this? And he finally took it and put it in his garage or whatever. Cost me $200 or $300 in commissions because of all the stuff we gave him. He wasn't looking for stuff. Because what he said, I'm having a problem with what I paid for the car, wasn't what he meant. What he meant was he was having a problem justifying what he paid for the car. I understood that because I sold the guy the car. And I knew that all I had to do was go back and remind him of those things that were most important. Had to hit his buying motives. My manager didn't hear that part of the conversation and misunderstood. You misunderstand most of the objections. It's not price. It's not I want to get a friend. It's not these others. It's generally something else. What we have to learn to do is find it. In the middle of the page on page 68, you might want to highlight it, underline it, circle it. It says you got to quit dropping the price to try to overcome every objection. There's a better way. Let's look at some ways to find the objection. And again, we're just trying to find it. We're not trying to overcome it. Page 69, the five-step method. The five-step method on how to find an objection. The customer just gave you an objection. Now, we'll go through this. We'll fill in the blanks, and then I'll go back through it. Customer just said, I'll think it over and get back to you. Now, when we get an objection, do we want to challenge it or disarm it? Obviously, we want to disarm it. What's a quick way to disarm it? Do we say something positive or negative? Positive. So, five-step method. First thing you want to do, A, is agree. I want to think it over. Great. A, agree. B, now we want to start leading them into a close or into the method here. B, we want to confirm. B, confirm. You guys are serious, aren't you? C, now we want to squeeze just a little bit. We don't want to push, we just want to squeeze a little bit. You aren't just saying that to get out of here, are you? Or you wouldn't just say that to get rid of me, would you? D, now we want to find out what it is they want to think over. We want to clarify. D, clarify. Bob, when you say you want to think it over, is it the color, the equipment, the options? Was it our dealership, something I said, or was it the price? Now, when I'm using this one, I'll almost always throw in what I think it is last. And if price is in your list, they'll almost always jump on price, and that's good. That's fine. I like price objections because they turn into budget objections. And budget objections are one of the easiest things to handle. It's a lot easier to squeeze something into the budget than it is to go find a silver car with an automatic somewhere else with an SE package. So I like price objections. They're one of the easiest to handle if you handle them correctly. So anyway, we want to clarify it. And Bob said, we're just not sure we can afford this particular car. Now, E, you want to rephrase it if you need to with whatever objection comes up. You want to isolate it and close on it. So you want to rephrase if necessary, isolate the objection, and then you want to close on the objection. Rephrase, isolate, and close. Let's go through this a little quicker. Bob said, I want to think it over and get back to you. Great. I know you wouldn't even take the time to think it over unless you're serious, would you? No, we really do want to think it over. I mean, you guys are serious, aren't you? Oh, sure, Joe. Yeah, we're really serious. And Bob, you wouldn't just say that to get out of here, would you? Oh, no. No, Julie, we're really serious. You know, there's just a lot to think over. Well, Bob, if you don't mind me asking, exactly what is it you want to think over? I mean, is it the color? Is it the equipment? Is it some of the other options? Is it, gosh, something I said, or is it the price? Nah, Joe, you know, we like the car, but we're just not sure we can afford it. Oh, so you just want to make sure it fits your budget, am I right? Well, yeah, I guess if it fit our budget, yeah, it's the car we want. So, Bob, other than budget, is there any other reason we couldn't send you home in it? No, if it's working the budget, I'd take it. Great, come on inside. Let's take care of the paperwork. Can I get you guys a cup of coffee? I want something cold to drink while we wrap this up. We just take the objection step by step by step and lead into a close. Now, when we got down to the close, what close did we use? Use an assumptive statement with an either-or question. All of the techniques lead to an assumptive statement, either-or question. It's a step-by-step-by-step process. Closing and overcoming objections is a step-by-step process. And again, when you read the scripts in your workbook, in the closing, in this, and the next part, read the steps as we go. It says clarify, isolate, rephrase throughout the thing, then it says close. And as you read through them, try to understand the process. Once you understand the process, this is easy. We've been taught to do all the wrong things. We get an objection, we try to close on it. Well, we're going to think it over. Well, what do we have to do to earn your business? And we immediately go to price, thinking that's the way to do it. It's not. We skip the steps. So the 5-step method is a very effective way. Now, I was talking to a fellow who came to a class one time down in San Diego, sells Lincoln Mercuries, and I wouldn't really recommend you do this, but it worked for him. He said he was talking to a customer, and he said, I was getting along real well with the guy. Remember, he just came to the class yesterday. He said, I was getting along with him real well. We were sitting down at my desk. He said, the desks are in the showroom. We sat down there visiting a little bit. He said, I tried to close. And the customer said, nah, you know, I think I'll think it over and get back to you. He said, I knew you just covered this yesterday. He said, but I couldn't remember what you said. I couldn't remember the 5-step method. He said, I was getting along real well with the customer. I built a lot of rapport. And he said, I just said to the customer, Bob, hold on a second. And he said, I reached in my desk, pulled out my workbook, and he said, Mr. Customer, I just went to a class on this yesterday, and I know there was a page in here on this. Hold on a second. And he pulled out the page, and he says, okay, here it is. Now, he said, okay, that's fine. I know you wouldn't take the time to think it over unless you're serious. And the customer said, yeah. He said, and you are serious, aren't you? And he said, yeah. And he said, you're not just pulling my leg and just saying something like that to get out of here, are you? He said, no. Cut the story short, they started laughing about it, and the customer bought the car. Was it the method, or was it because he built rapport, or was it because he used enthusiasm, or was it because he broke the ice? I don't know. It's probably a combination of all of them. I don't really recommend that you use the workbook to close sales, but if you built enough rapport with a customer, you can do almost anything. And I think it was the rapport that got the salesperson through the sale with the customer, not whether he pulled this out of the desk or not. Page 70, there's another way to find the objection. This is a pretty easy method. This is called the 2-step. Customer said, I'll think it over and get back to you. First thing you always want to do when you have an objection, or they say, I'll think it over, one of the first things you want to say, so you do like the car? Oh, yeah, we like the car. That's A, that's called confirming. A, we want to confirm. The 2-step, the first step is to confirm. We want to think it over. So you do like the car? Oh, yeah, we like the car. The second step is to find out why. B, find out why they're hesitating. So you do like the car? Oh, yeah, we like the car. Well, Bob, if you don't mind me asking, you're hesitating, and if you don't mind me asking, what would be the reason? Well, Joe, we're just not sure. You know, it's a pretty expensive car. Again, most people go to price, and that's great, because price is the easiest thing to rephrase down to budget to get a commitment on. If he says, Joe, it's a lot of car, it's a lot more money we meant to spend. Sound like you guys are on a budget, aren't you? Well, yeah, we are. Bob, let me ask you a question. If we could find a way to fit this thing in your budget, I mean, if we could look at all the numbers and everything and it came out right and you were okay with it, would there be any other reason you couldn't take it home today? Well, gosh, no. So confirm, ask why. Now, you could use a 1-step method, and a lot of people never thought of asking why. Guy could say, I'll think it over. Why is that? Now, somebody in class said, well, wouldn't a customer be offended if you just pulled out of the air? Why is that? It sounds a little controversial, or a little like you're putting a little pressure. Asking why doesn't put pressure if I built rapport. If I did this part out here, this part's easy. It's when you don't do this part out here, you don't build a value, you don't follow the basics, you don't build rapport, you don't investigate, then yeah, using any of these is kind of tough. You should be able to ask a customer, Bob, if you don't mind me asking, why are you going to think it over? I mean, you can again supply the answers. Was it the color, equipment, something I said, or is it the price? And again, if price is on the list, they'll almost always go to it. Page 71. Number 3, if you were me. And this is real easy to use. Customer said, I'll think it over. You've tried to close, and they come back with the objection, I'll think it over. Just, Bob, help me out for a second. Sure, Joe, what do you need? If you were me, and you had a customer, you had the perfect car, you knew everything was going to be right for him, you just couldn't convince him of that, what would you do? Remember, we're only trying to find the objection. The customer will say, oh, Joe, it's nothing, we're really just, we're just a little unsure and it's a lot of money. Oh, gosh, I can sure understand that. It sounds like you guys are on a budget, aren't you? Yeah, we sure are. They think they're off the hook. I said, well, I can sure understand that. And I know how you guys feel, and it sounds like you're on a budget, aren't you? Yeah, we are. Bob, let me ask you a question, though. You do like the car, don't you? Oh, sure, we like the car. Are we not doing a summary close now? So you sure like the car, don't you? Yeah, it has the equipment you want, doesn't it? Yeah, and I know you hadn't planned on that sunroof. That's kind of nice, isn't it? Yeah. Bob, it sounds like we found a perfect car. And assuming this thing fits your budget, would there be any other reason we couldn't send you home in it today? Gosh, no, I guess I'd take it. Now, that was a yes or no question, but that was all right in that case because we'd just done the summary and we'd gotten the approvals. So what you'll find is as you go through these, all of these methods start working together. Take it step by step. Number 4 is a lot of fun. Number 4, call their bluff. Call their bluff. A lot of people say, Joe, we like the car, and gosh, we just got to take care of a couple things, and we'll come back in a little bit. A lot of people say, Joe, we like the car, we just got to grab a bite to eat, and then we'll be back in a little bit. A lot of people say, Joe, we like the car, I'll come back later tonight, I've got to do some things. Call their bluff. This one's fun. First one there, example A, I'll be back later to buy it. First thing we need to do is what? Confirm. So you do like the car. So this is the car you want to own. Oh yeah, Joe, we like the car. Tell you what, Bob, while you're gone, I'll go ahead and get the paperwork started. Let me have a quick deposit and sign a couple forms here. We'll get this thing cleaned up and ready to deliver. Now, what are we doing this for? We're just trying to find the objection. As soon as you say, no problem, we'll go ahead and get the paperwork started, have it ready to deliver. I just need you to sign a couple things. About that time, he's going to say, whoa, now wait a minute. Oh, Bob, you weren't coming back, were you? Well, Joe, really, we're having a... And then they'll tell you the objection, whatever the objection is. You know the people who say, I'll be back later, we're going to grab a bite to eat? You have to have some money in your pocket, and you have to just be ready with this one instantly. Guy says, Joe, I'm going to be back in a little bit. We're going to grab a quick bite to eat. Say, gosh, great. Would you guys do me a favor? Hand them $5. Before they can say no, say, guys, do me a favor and grab me a quick hamburger on your way back. Now, some of you guys have tried this. Does it work? It absolutely works. We're trying to find the objection. You can watch their expression change. They look at each other and they say, Betty, that didn't work. So they come back and give the objection. I've never had anybody take my money and not either get me a hamburger. I've never had anybody take the money and leave and not come back. So try that one. That's very effective. We're going to grab a bite to eat. Great. Grab me a hamburger real quick and call their bluff. Last one down here, I'll be back later to buy it. So you do want it? Sure. Tell you what, I'll save you some time. I'm going to be in your neighborhood later this afternoon anyway. I'll have the lot man follow me over. We'll type up the paperwork, and we'll just do it there. What's a good time? Around 4:30, 5 o'clock, something like that? Remember, we're trying to find the objection. If he says, yeah, that'd be great, go ahead and do it. Meet him at 5 o'clock and deliver the car to him. Remember, we're still just trying to find the objection. Have you ever heard of a Ben Franklin close? Have any of you ever used a Ben Franklin close? Now, just a little history, some of you don't know. Ben Franklin, you heard of him back in 1700s, guy with the key and the kite and all that stuff. He was also America's first self-made millionaire, first guy who ever made $1 million on his own. And back in the 1700s, $1 million is a lot of money. And just for reference, there's a millionaire every 12 minutes in today's market. So times have changed. If he's going to make $1 million then, I'd listen to some of the stuff he says. Now, Ben Franklin, when he used to make decisions, would make decisions one way. If he had an important decision, he'd get a blank sheet of paper, he'd write yes on one side, he'd write no on the other side, and he'd go ahead and list all the reasons in favor of on the left and all the reasons against on the right, and that's how he made his decisions. And when you use this close, there's the long version of a Ben Franklin and the short version. The short version is just a piece of paper with a line drawn down the middle. This could say lease, this could say purchase. This could say blue car, this could say red car. You're still using a Ben Franklin type close. It's the Ben Franklin decision-making process, or the Ben Franklin balance sheet close, whatever you want to call it. Let's go through the longer version, and don't bother to read the words on page 72. I already memorized them for you. And if you're going to use the close, you're going to have to memorize the words too. Now, there's no guy named J. Douglas Edwards, trainer, said memorize the words exactly. I would suggest you memorize them exactly and don't change them. If you change them, you may leave out the closing part. You use this close, let's say you've got Bob and Betty again, let's say that you were closing, you were sitting down at the desk, because you kind of need a desk and a piece of paper to use this one if you're going to use the long version. Sitting down at the desk, and Bob says, Joe, I think we're going to think it over and get back to you. This also works well with a customer who's pretty committed, but it's just kind of iffy, can't quite make a decision. Really well, though, with I'll think it over. They say, I'll think it over and get back to you. Now, your close starts out with, great. I know you wouldn't take the time to think it over unless you were serious. And he says, no, we're really serious. So, Bob, you know there's no guy named Ben Franklin? And most of us have always considered him one of the wisest men in our country, and a lot of people don't realize he's America's first self-made millionaire. And you know, when he found himself in a position like you're in today, faced with an important decision, if it was the right thing to do, he wanted to make sure he did it. Gosh, on the other hand, if it was the wrong thing to do, he wanted to make sure he didn't do it. And I imagine that's how you feel, isn't it? Oh, yeah, that's exactly how we feel. You know, Bob, here's what he used to do. He'd pull out a blank sheet of paper. You pull out a blank sheet of paper. He'd draw a line down the middle. He'd write yes on this side. He'd write no on this side. Then he'd list all the reasons in favor of his decision on the left, all the reasons against on the right, and when he was done, all he had to do was count the items in each column, and his decision was obvious. In fact, why don't we try it real quick? Slide the paper over to Bob and Betty. Say, now, Bob, why don't you guys go ahead and list the reasons in favor of this little blue car out here? And they say, okay, and they start listing reasons and listing reasons, listing reasons. You just do your mental counting as they're listing reasons. You want 20 plus on the left, and that's real easy to get. If you've done a nice job on the lot, this is a piece of cake. And if they hit a snag, say, now, don't forget that sunroof. I know you guys hadn't planned on it, but that flow-through ventilation is kind of nice, isn't it? Oh, yeah, I forgot about that sunroof. And it had the cruise control. Remember that multifunction speed control system with memory you guys said you were kind of impressed with? Oh, yeah, that had that, too. And that means better gas mileage, too, doesn't it? Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. It's easy to get to 20 plus. Now, without sounding like you're grasping for straws on this side, one of the last things you want to say is, well, gosh, that's about all I can think of on the positive side. Can you guys think of anything else? And they say, nah, Joe, that's about it. Well, why don't y'all go ahead and list the reasons against? Now, don't help them on the right side. You don't help them come up with the things they don't like. You just back off and say, why don't you guys list the reasons against? Now, if you've done this before, you would probably agree that you wouldn't have any more than maybe 3 things on the list, hopefully 1 or 2. Let's say color, because they originally wanted blue and all you had was silver. Equipment, they wanted an automatic and all you had is a 5-speed, and let's say price was on the list. And price almost always hits the list here too. So you give them a few seconds. You don't give them minutes. You don't help them on this one. It'll take them about 10 or 15 seconds to come up with these 3 things on the right. And you take the sheet of paper and you say, okay, Bob, let's see what we got here. Now you want to hold the paper towards them so they can see what you've got. So you turn it towards them and you say, okay, let's see. On the plus side, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 2, gosh, 3. And smile, stick out your hand, say, Bob, sounds like your decision's obvious. How do you want to register it, in your name or somebody else's? And close. Now, those of you guys who use this, would you agree that it works, closes pretty close to 50% of the time? More? I don't doubt that. 75, 80% of the time. But remember, we weren't necessarily trying to close the sale. What were we trying to do? Customer said, I'll think it over. What was our motive behind using this? To find the objections. What do we have on the right side of the board? They're only objections to buying. Let me show you another technique. Remember using those either/or questions? Now that we've gotten this down, let's say that we close the sale half the time. That means half the time we didn't close the sale. So now all we have is a Ben Franklin with objections on the right. Those either/or questions, let me show you how easy it is to get from 3 objections down to a single objection. I wouldn't personally want to have to overcome all 3 of these. This looks like I got to go dealer trade a car and sell it to them cheap. So I would rather not have to overcome all 3 of these. So let's see if we can narrow them down a little bit. Now, if this sounds too easy, I did it right. Bob, tell me, of color, equipment, and price, which is most important? He said, well, Joe, price, you know, this is pretty expensive. Now, you need the pen and paper so that you can draw a line through these things as he's talking. Say, Bob, of these 3, which is most important? If price is on here, they'll almost always pick price. Bob, which is most important? Well, Joe, you know, it's kind of expensive. So you could live with the blue, you could drive the 5-speed as long as we can get this price within your range, am I right? Now, when you draw lines through these, mentally you cross them off in their mind. You're right, it doesn't work every time. Sometimes they say, Joe, they're all important. That's all right. If I ask the question the first time and say, Bob, of the 3, which is most important? If he says, Joe, they're all important. Let's use tone and inflection and change the question. Bob, I understand they're all important, but tell me, of the three, which is most important? Oh, well, Joe, if I had to pick one, it'd be price. So she could live with the blues, she could drive a 5-speed, as long as we can get this price within your budget. Am I right? Yeah, I guess. But now we don't want price as the objection, so what do we do with price? We rephrase it. We start narrowing it down. First thing we do is clarify. Now, Bob, if I understand it right, you guys are going to make payments. When you say the price has to be right, what you're really talking about is the payments. Am I right? He says, yeah, if these payments are too high, we can't afford this. So as long as we can keep this in your budget, is there any other reason we couldn't send you home in a car right now? No. If you could keep this within my budget, we'll take it. We went from I'll think it over to 3 objections to a single objection to clarifying it to rephrasing it to a commitment. This is a step-by-step process, and you can do this with almost all the people almost all the time, whether you're using a Ben Franklin or any other method. Closing is a step-by-step process. Handling objections. Remember, clarify, isolate, rephrase, bypass, close on objections. Those other questions, in fact, when you go back and read the Ben Franklin close, highlight all of the techniques that we've used. Highlight the yes questions, the either-or questions, highlight the involvement questions, highlight anything that has to do with those 5 questions and those 5 techniques. And you'll find that every script is filled with these things. And it's just a step-by-step process. Of these 3, which is most important? This one. And when you say this one, what you mean is this, right? Yeah. And that really narrows down to budget then, doesn't it? Absolutely. Now, on page 73, there's a page of examples. The page is filled out. It's just exactly what I just did here. And the directions on how to get this down to a single objection are also on there. The script to do that. Our motive behind this section was to just find the objection. We've got the 5-step method, we've got the 2-step method, we've got the if you were me method, we've called their bluff on some of those things, grab me a hamburger real quick, or a Ben Franklin. A Ben Franklin works extremely well with I'll think it over, that iffy customer. Again, we were searching for the real objection. And once you find the real objection, we need to learn to close on it. We're still out on the lot. We haven't made it inside yet, with the exception of maybe this Ben Franklin we were setting down somewhere. We're outside on the lot. We built value. We've closed. Now we know what the objection is. On the next tape, let's learn how to close on the objection. Now we have an objection. Let's learn to close on it. So go through these, review them, and find your favorite one on these. You're going to need to practice, drill, and rehearse these things. That'll be part of your homework. And when we come back, we'll go over 10 methods to close on the objections that you get. I'll see you on the next tape.
This concludes this segment of your training program. As Joe says, the key to your success in learning to close more sales and hold gross is to practice, drill, and rehearse the techniques he's giving you in this training series. And don't forget, be sure to complete the homework assignment for this tape before you go on to the next tape. Good luck on the quiz, too, and we'll see you in the next tape.